Alright, guys, welcome back to the pod. What is up? What is up? The four assumptions. We're starting a new chapter, new agreement. I'm a little out of it, guys. I've been purposely maybe a little bit sleep deprived today, and just I was trying to bang out some job applications and things, and working a little bit on a project and put in a little bit of work on those two things, and decided let me just get back to doing some podcasting because that's kind of what I want to do today. I don't really feel like doing much else. I'll probably just do that and then go to bed. It's a little after 6:30 p.m. right now. Oh, it's almost 7 p.m. actually. I'll probably only stay up till like 9:30 p.m. I'm gonna call in an early night. But yeah, so pages 63, 64, 65, 66. Page 63 starts on the third agreement, which is in chapter 4. The third agreement is don't make assumptions. So, I like this part on page. I try to take a quote from each time if I find something that's kind of nice. They say an example. This is page 65 at the bottom. You are walking in the mall and you see a person you like. That person turns to you and smiles and then walks away. You can make a lot of assumptions just because of this one experience. With these assumptions, you can create a whole fantasy. And you really want to believe this fantasy and make it real. And it basically goes on to say that, maybe you have this belief, oh, this person really likes me. And this whole like fantasy about this whole relationship and getting married and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I mean, I can honestly say I've had that happen before. Not exactly like walking in the mall or whatever, but I mean, I can definitely say that, I've probably multiple interactions I've had with people. I've made an assumption. It can be simple stuff like, you're talking to a friend that, mentions something that, like maybe you had plans to go out, to do something, like tentative plans, but it wasn't anything solid. And you have plans to go do something, and then you're kind of like in a group discussion, like with some friends and that person, and they mention like, oh, like you were gonna come over the other day, and like you didn't come over. I know like we couldn't meet up, and like I really wanted you to come over and stuff. And it's like, cool, like nice. It's nice to have people who want you to come over. Nice to have people who want you around. And even if they were just calmly saying it, just stating it like it's just their opinion, and it can be easy to take something like that and assume like, oh, like they're saying this because they're upset with me. They're saying this because they don't, because they're upset that I wasn't able to come over to their house. Or, whatever reason. But it's like, maybe they're just mentioning it, acknowledging that, they wanted to meet up, like maybe they weren't even having like a negative opinion about the fact that it didn't happen, like it's very possible that, somebody would just not really have a lot to say, like a lot to assume Like, it's kind of interesting. Because it's like, oh, this person's mad at me. But then it's like, are they? Like, they didn't mention it maybe before. They didn't mention it maybe in an angry voice. They weren't specifically stating that they were angry at you. Their tone didn't seem angry. They were talking matter of factly. And, it's like to assume that they're hurt or mad or angry when they're not implying it in any way is like, well, maybe I feel bad or guilty. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's not because they, maybe it's not, I don't know, like maybe it's just not true, or, I know it happens a lot with like dating, like meeting somebody, and you could be like really interested and like, oh, like I really like this person, and it could be like one date, and it's like, it's easy to like picture like, oh, like I can imagine them meeting with my friends, and I can imagine going to this event together, and I can imagine that we like concerts and we're just gonna go party at all these concerts all the time, and I can imagine, that they, just the things that you can imagine doing together. And it's like, in reality, it's like you're literally just going out to get coffee a couple times, maybe, go out and meet in the sunshine and take some walks around the park and take some walks at the beach and get to know one another, and who knows what they're thinking, like, and it's easy to just kind of like create like a whole life that doesn't even exist. I mean, how many times do we even do this with things that we're stressed about, right? Like, I've noticed, like, it can be really hard to think outside the box when, there's a stressful situation coming up. Like, for example, Friday, I had this job interview, and Thursday night, I could barely sleep. Like, I couldn't figure out what it was. Like, I was kind of like, why am I up? And I'm like so wired. And, I wasn't sure why I was feeling that way. And, I was so wired and just kind of like, experiencing some amount of exhaustion and, stress. And I just found it pretty interesting that I kind of was thinking of like, oh, like, sometimes I'm not very well spoken. Like, you guys hear me on here. Like, this is how I just talk, like, sometimes I lose my train of thought. Sometimes I'm, not really able to easily articulate what I'm trying to say. And I didn't want to schedule the interview in the morning, because I was like, well, if I don't sleep well, sometimes it's hard to do things early in the morning because I need to eat a good meal and everything. And so maybe it makes more sense for me to not do this early in the morning and to do it later in the day. And so I picked 2 p.m. because I was like, that's the best time of day for me, because I'll definitely be awake, and if I need to take a nap, I'll take a nap. But one thing I wasn't accounting for is that 2 or 3 p.m. I kind of do get an energy dip. And so I was thinking of all these other reasons why scheduling at 2 would have been good, but then I didn't really consider why scheduling at 2 would have been like not so easy. And then once Thursday night came along, the night before the interview on Friday, like I basically was kind of like, man, like I can't sleep. And so I know that like around 2 p.m., I'm going to have this issue with kind of being like alert. And I think I took a nap. I ended up falling asleep and taking a nap until like the afternoon. Like, I basically wasn't able to do too much, and took a nap in the afternoon. And because I started napping, Um, I was a little groggy, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I was refreshed, maybe I was groggy. And I had a little bit of a sip of C4 because I knew I was going to go to the gym afterwards. And, it didn't really help get me alert. Um, I was just too tired because I hadn't really slept the night before. So the interview maybe didn't go its best, but it wasn't necessarily because sometimes I have trouble expressing myself, especially if I'm under pressure or under like stress from like being like on the spot. And this interview was not like, there was a lot about it that was just like a little bit stressful. Like I was learning like new things that nobody had told me before, because I talked in a screening interview before, and this was like the second round of interviews, and I was like, they were revealing more information of something that wasn't said before. Like something like the first person told me the job was Mondays through Fridays, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then during the second round of interviews, they said that the interview was the same thing with the Monday through Fridays. But then they said Saturdays 9 to 6. And I was like, I'm not going to work Saturdays. Like, and I'm just like, okay, so they kind of threw that out there. And I'm like, that's already strike one on my end. So I'm already thinking, like, this isn't a good fit, Like, right when I go into this interview, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to work Saturdays. Like, especially because I've got all these plans coming up on Saturdays that I want to do. Like, there's no way I'm going to work Saturdays. And so I'm like, that's already a bad decision as it is. And so I decided, I'm not going to do that. But I went through with the interview. The interview was, at first, they checked to make sure I was like in the Zoom room, and then from there, they kind of closed the screen out and said they had to go do something else. They were going to start in a little bit. And, they came back maybe 5 minutes later, and, the interviewer, their speech was so pressured and they were talking so rapidly, and it was a little bit stressful. Like, it didn't make it for like a calm environment. And then, surprise, surprise, the interview starts and there's myself and this other person on the screen with the interviewer, and we're both interviewing for this job at the same time. The first person, well, not the first, the other person was able to answer the responses first. And so, I'm sitting there thinking of my responses, but also I hate those kind of interviews because it's like, it's hard to not say some of the stuff that they say. And then, like, of course I add my own ideas because some of my ideas are already going to be the same. But part of it's like, it's a little less pressure. They take a little bit of pressure off because, it's a slight amount of pressure taken off. Just a slight amount, because you hear somebody's responses before yours. But it's not like fully like the pressure's off. Like, there's pressure that there's somebody else like sitting in there with you, hearing you. So it's not like, there's not like a lot of privacy, like, and there wasn't a lot of like chit chat, get to know one another. It was just cold, hard, like, this is the job roles, this is what we're doing, like, this is what we're covering today, okay, here we go. And there wasn't really a lot of space to like explain myself more. Like, there was a point where the other person in there kind of explained themselves a little bit more, and I was just like, it's hard to like listen to someone else while you're interviewing and then listen to the person who's interviewing you and then talk about yourself and think about what you need to say. It was just too much. I was just like, goodness. And then how they were describing the job, I was like, this just doesn't fit, this just doesn't fit like what I'm looking for, like they mentioned that there would be like exams during the training sessions, and it seems like the training I was initially told was 3 weeks, but it sounds like uh, the first phase of the initial job you could get would last for like 3 to 5 months, and then they bump you up from there. And there would be like exams at the end of every shift. So it's kind of like you're competing with your basically a cohort, because they call it training and stuff like that. And so I'm like, geez. And so they have you like doing these like competitions, and it's just like, dude, I just want to work. Like, I'm not trying to do all that. Like, I'm not trying to like be like at work like worrying like, am I gonna get cut the next day? It's like, if you hire me, just let me do my job. Let me get an 8 hour shift every day and just work. Like, I'm not trying to be like, okay, I might as well just keep applying to jobs because I don't know when's gonna be my last day. It's like, that to me does not feel very stable, and it doesn't seem worth my time anyways. And just the style of things, like I look at different things, and so I could easily make assumptions there and judge like I was making assumptions and judging like, man, if I get offered this position, I already don't want to work Saturdays, and they kind of seemed like they kind of just threw that in, like, and then they mentioned they don't want they didn't want us to work like, I guess like we would work as teams, but like they didn't really describe the actual role either of like what you'd be doing. Like, they explained like there'd be teaching opportunities, teaching roles, and you'd basically just be like talking to groups of clients. And I'm just thinking like, what are we teaching? Like, what are we talking about? Like, and they said, they didn't really have question and answer time or anything like that. So I was kind of like, this is like one of the crappier interviews. And I was kind of like not into it. And so like, basically I could picture like in my head when the interviewer was saying these things about like the explanations of the job and just like the questions they were asking, but mostly about how they had described parts of the job. And I was thinking about like how this job role would look, and I'm just thinking like, this isn't going to be a good fit. Now, do I know that for sure? No, but some things about the energy, like I really focus a lot on energy of staff. Now, Friday late afternoon, a couple hours before a job site closes, you're probably not going to hear back. I mean, you're probably not gonna have somebody, wanting to really talk. Like, they're probably at one of the most fatigued periods of their day, while they're speaking to you. And so, or of their week, I mean, as they're speaking to you, and possibly a fatigued time of the day, because it isn't uncommon for people to have energy dips around 2 or 3 p.m. That's very common. And so, to have someone who's already fatigued, probably just drank a bunch of coffee because they knew that they needed to, in my mind, I'm like, oh man, like, this is one example of what the work culture here looks like. But then when I do think of it more, I'm like, okay, this person was probably fatigued because they're at the end of their week. It's a holiday weekend. Like, we've got multiple holidays this weekend. It's, a couple hours before they've got to end their job shift. They've probably got a lot of other stuff to do. It's towards the end of the day, towards the end of their shift, and they've probably got a lot of work to do, and they're just banging out these interviews so that they can finish the rest of their work before they leave for the weekend. So of course they're going to be rushed, and like that that's no that's no way to really look at, what a job culture really is. I mean, it's a little glimpse about part of the week. But to me, it's like, for me, having overly caffeinated staff is a red flag. For me, it's a red flag because I've worked at sites where people have trouble with caffeine consumption because they need the energy, and then I notice people having caffeine crashes, and then that affects the workplace because people, start having crashes, and they get really irritated and short with one another and kind of like impatient and start to say things in a little bit of an insensitive tone. I kind of prefer when people don't have a lot of caffeine in their system because they tend to be like just nicer, but I don't really know a lot of people who don't use caffeine at all. Like, I do know, I have some friends who don't consume any caffeine like ever, but I like caffeine for productive purposes, but it backfires for me too. Like, I get irritable, it impacts my sleep negatively. Like, I don't really like the crash from it, but it helps. Like, I do like it, but it's not the best of options for me to like take caffeine usually. But I'll do it. I'll still do it anyways. But yeah, like, I just got out of a pretty intensive work environment, and it's like I'm not saying that like the job needs to be like the easiest thing on the face of the planet and I need to be just like sitting there not working, but it's like it doesn't even sound like something I want to do. Like, I don't really want to be like competing with other staff and like, like, I mean, a little healthy competition is always fun, but it's like, I'm not trying to like, start with the mindset of like I want to outperform people. It's like I like to set my own goals and outperform myself and still be at the top, but I'm not like, directly trying to do anything like that. So yeah, I don't really know. Like, I think it's gonna become a little bit more like, I don't know, like, when it comes to making assumptions, I think it's a little bit it can be hard to avoid making assumptions. Like, I do think that we kind of do naturally just start assuming things, because we kind of have to make some kind of predictions about the future sometimes. We can't just like, and how we make those decisions usually is based on how we assume what's going to happen next. Like, okay, if I do this, or if somebody says or does this or that, then these are the options that might follow. And so we're kind of good at that, but it's not always accurate. And then I feel like, I mean, the book didn't really say this, but I feel like what kind of happens is when we have an assumption about something, we kind of do take it and run with it. But then, like, once we start having that fantasy about how it's gonna look, like how this job is gonna look, how stressed I'm gonna be if I start here, how that relationship's gonna look from that person who looked at me at the mall or whatever, and like how it's gonna be with that person, and how it might be like interacting with my friends or family or whatever if we start to date and get more serious. Like, it's kind of hard not to think that way. But then, depending which direction we go with it, the energy we put in kind of goes towards those things. Like if I think somebody likes me, I'm going to treat them differently than if I thought somebody hates me. You know what I mean? And it's just an assumption one way or the other. Like I can think someone's mad at me. I can think someone looked at me weird for some negative reason. Or maybe they looked at me weird because they were having a stomach pain and they didn't, they don't even know me and they were looking past and saw me looking in their direction. And just naturally when people make eye contact with you, as strangers, when someone looks at you, you kind of do like a lot of times engage. Like sometimes people won't engage, but I find myself like if somebody looks in my direction, I'll usually look in their direction too. And I think just naturally you kind of might do that. And who knows what a person has on their heart or their mind when they're just like staring off into space. Like it's like, I don't know. Like I can be a smiley person. I can be a giggly, laughy person. I can be pretty serious when I'm in my head and I'm just like thinking about something. And sometimes I'm like deep in my mind about stuff, like sitting there waiting for some kind of thing. Like, I don't know, like I went to AAA not that long ago, like, and just the event of going to AAA, it's like you're in the space with people who don't know you and like you're talking to them and there's staff there, there's other people there. Like the time before this one that I went to AAA, the person who was in charge of getting the sales for insurance, for car insurance, he was trying to convince me to get it and to get AAA insurance, and I was just like, no, because I'd already paid for my other insurance, and he was just like, oh, like you could still just do it, like why don't you just, you could just do it, like it makes more sense, you can just call them and cancel it. And I was just thinking like, yeah, but call them and cancel it when I already paid like 40 something bucks, and even though the other one was like 30 something bucks, like I'm like, how long is it going to take the other place to give me back my money? And like, like I was just kind of thinking like, I don't want to deal with all this right now. Like I didn't come in here to like do all that. I just, I didn't think through that as a financial decision. And it's like, well, I can always call back at another date and just schedule it. Like, so I was just kind of like, I don't even know why I would want to pay more. But then it's like, to have to pay less would take like a lot of other effort and still having to pay again. And then I don't know if another car insurance would reimburse me. Like I was kind of like, I haven't looked into that, and here's this person just trying to make a sale, and I'm like, well, if they don't reimburse me, then but then like he was kind of like seeming annoyed. He was like sarcastic and annoyed. Like I don't know, like sometimes there's people that are like that. Like they've just got like a weird vibe about them that like they're not like rude, but it's like if somebody asked me, do you want to talk to this guy or somebody different, I'd probably choose somebody different. If I had to talk to them again, like I was like, I wouldn't have called that like the most pleasant experience, because it was kind of like, AAA, they're trying to upsell you, and like I was kind of like, dude, I just wanted to come in here and get this thing signed and like go home. Like I'm not trying to like buy more stuff, and like I understand it's a business, and once they've got you in the door, it's a lot more convenient for them to just walk you over down the hall to somebody else. But it's like, I was not coming here for all this. So, like it's easy for me to assume that like, yeah, that guy was annoyed that I didn't buy, or that guy was annoyed, but I was kind of like, I don't even care. Like, I don't care if somebody's annoyed. I don't care. I just wanted to not have to deal with it anymore. So, I'm yeah, I don't know if I have much more to say about assumptions, but I can kind of see how making an assumption would lead to making a making a lot of decisions or putting a lot of energy into whichever direction we think something's going with what we're assuming. And so I don't really know, like, but yeah. So, alright, guys. Well, with that, that's all I've got to say. Happy about this new chapter. Happy about this new week. Let's see what unfolds. Thanks for listening.